Welcome, impactful parents. It's question and answer Thursday. And today we're going to talk about how do I pick a caregiver for my child, whether it's a babysitter or a nanny or an au pair, or it doesn't matter. The advice is the same. And although at the Impactful Parent, we focus on school age children, a lot of what I'm going to say today is going to apply to infants also. So I hope that you sit back and watch. If you don't know, my name is Christina and I am founder of the Impactful Parent, and I come on here every Thursday and answer one of your questions that you have live. And if you'd like to submit a question for me for next week, please do. You can direct message me on social media, or you can email me at theimpactfulparent@gmail.com. Now let's get to our question. So today's question, I had someone call me and ask me, how do I pick a babysitter, a caregiver, a nanny? They just didn't even care. They just need somebody to take care of their kids. So I was like, well, I got your answer for you. Now, the first thing you're going to do, and is I highly suggest right now, is get a piece of paper and a pencil, because all the information I'm going through today is quite a bit, and I don't want you to miss an impactful moment. So the first thing you're going to do is ask yourself two really important questions that are going to lead the rest of all the questioning and the interviewing process. Because what you need, what you really need is super important. And you have to be very clear on that before you even start the process. But it's super simple. There's only two questions you need to ask yourself. And the first one is, what personality qualities am I looking for? So these kind of personality qualities are things like, are you looking for somebody to be dependable? Are you looking for someone to be punctual? Are you looking for a loving caregiver? Those are the things, again, personality qualities. The second thing you're going to be asking yourself, and I would write everything down, is what skills am I looking for in my caregiver? Things like, do you want them to clean? Do they need to know how to do laundry? Do they have to know how to drive? These are all really important things to clarify in your own head exactly what's going to fit the bill when you start interviewing several candidates. So start with that. Very, very important. Now, after that, you're going to start making interviewing questions. And that's primarily what I'll be talking about today, because that's the essence of how you will pick a caregiver. And with the interviewing questions, you're going to start off as easy questions, and then the questions become increasingly more difficult as you interview. And I do recommend that you interview a minimum of 4 times on 4 different days in order to pick a caregiver. I understand that the platforms out there that offer different caregiving experiences, like care.com or like nanny services or au pair websites, they say that they have screened everybody and they've done background checks and things like that, and that everybody's good. But I'm telling you, do not trust all of that. I have used several different types of caregivers over my many years of being a parent. And one thing I found is that there are good eggs and there are bad eggs in every single platform. And it is really the interviewing questions and processes that weed out what is going to work for you and what really, really isn't. And so do not trust the platform to do the work for you. It is your child that you're trying to have somebody take care of. And it's just an important process that you can't shortcut by relying that somebody else is going to do the work for you. So when you're starting to look at the interviewing process, again, you're going to start with really easy questions, and they're going to get increasingly more difficult as the 4 interviews at minimum start to progress. And I like to use Bloom's taxonomy because I'm a teacher. So that kind of guide my interviewing questions. And so let's talk about interview number 1. Interview number 1 is very much a recall information type of interview. This is where you're going to do a lot of date night questions. It's hello, how are you? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your job experience, not even just caregiving experience, job experience in general, because all of that is great information to have on what kind of experience they've had in the workforce. Tell me just all the simple kinds of yes, no, a little bit about you, kind of get to know you questions. Now, the initial interview there is, not only to meet the person, but the objective really to interview number 1 is actually for you to tell the candidates all of your expectations and what you want in a caregiver. So I know that sounds a little backwards for a lot of people, but this is a really efficient way to weed out people immediately. When you tell them, this is what I'm looking for, and you already know what you're looking for because you've already previously answered those 2 questions of personality and skill set, and you tell them, this is what I'm looking for. You're making it very transparent. And if at the end of that interview you say, look, if it doesn't seem like it's a good fit for you, it's completely fine. Give them at that point at least 12 hours, but you could put like 24 hours or even 48 hours, depending on your timetable of finding a caregiver, to respond back to you whether or not they feel like they're still a good candidate and they're in to continue on to the next interview. And yeah, I actually put the ball in their court. And because so much of caregivers, or so many caregivers are young adults, a lot of our new generation does not know how to manage conflict very well. And with that in mind, I would not ask them to give you a call and tell you, or tell you in person if they're in or not. I would tell them from the beginning, hey, here's my email, or here is my text, my phone number, and just text me whether or not you're in or not. And if they ghost, which hopefully they do not, but if they ghost, you know that they're not the fit for you, obviously. But hopefully they'll get back to you. I also tell these candidates, do not text me tonight, the same day of the interview, that you're in or not. I put it really blatantly out for them. Tell them you need at least 12 hours to mull this over and think about whether or not all the information I gave you today about what I'm looking for and what I need, if you're that person. And so I don't want them to tell me the same day of the interview, which is why I say 12 hours or 24 or 48. And then they can text you or email you back, which again, text and email are a lot less threatening than in-person or face-to-face conflict, which is what a lot of people who are telling you no is, that's how they look at it. It looks like to them as conflict. So you're just trying to make the process simple and easy for them and comfortable. So just to recap, interview number 1, simple questions, date night questions, get to know you questions, and really the main objective is for you to tell them what you're looking for and if they still think that they're a good fit. Now let's go to interview number 2. Now interview number 2, you're going to up the level of questions, of course, and now we're going to talk about understanding questions. So what this means is you're going to ask them to explain to you the concepts or their ideas about taking care of kids. So you're trying to get an idea of what kind of caregiver they are. Kind of caregiver. So are they authoritarian, or are they more of a collaborative kind of caregiver? Depending on what you're looking for, this is what you're trying to dig out in this particular interview. So you may ask them things like, tell me about a time when a child got hurt under your care, and what did you do? You might want to ask them about, tell me about the families that you've worked with before. And just give me a scenario, some things that might have happened. What were the personalities of each of the kids that you have taken care of before? Were they easy? Were they difficult? What did you do when they were difficult? Were there tactics that you might have used to help you along, to get them to be more cooperative? What did you learn from those experiences? So again, you're just getting that information input to them to figure out, okay, what kind of caregiver am I looking at right now? Is that going to be the kind of caregiver that I want to put in my child's care? So at the end of that interview, once again, you say, hey, please don't respond to me tonight, but if you still are interested in this process, please let me know and tell me within 12, 48, whatever the amount of time you want to give them. And again, the ball is in their court to continue on. Now, starting with interview 2, if you didn't like their responses, certainly you can always email them back to and say, you know what, I've decided I'm going to go a separate direction. And I appreciate your time. And I hope that things go well with you, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a good fit for my family. So this is where you start getting into that. Now let's go on to interview 3. Now, interview 3, you're going to be asking them more applying questions. And what I mean by that is you're going to say, use your experience and tell me what would you do in these particular scenarios. And I love interview number 3 in particular because you get to be a little creative on the scenarios that are going to happen. And every scenario should go back to things that you wanted in those skill sets when you were asking yourself about those skills that you needed them. So let's put for an example. Maybe the skill set you needed was you need your caregiver to be a driver. Okay, that's very common for a school-aged parent to need a driver, maybe to take your child to and from school. Okay, well, in this particular interview, now I'm going to be asking them things like, all right, well, let's say you were driving my child to school and somebody hit you or you hit somebody and you got into a car accident. What would you do in that situation? These are really important things that you need to find out. How they react, what is their thinking like, and is the response what you would want them to respond like? Super important. I love interview number 3. So you're trying to get that caregiving philosophy out, but more in a scenario-based impromptu questions. So what if my child cries and cries and cries and they won't stop? What would you do? Or what if my child falls and hurts themselves and for whatever reason you can't get a hold of me? What would you do? These are super important things. And again, you can base your questions and these scenarios off of the skill sets that you're really looking for or those personality qualities that you're trying to dig out. It is also interview number 3 that I highly suggest you meet the person in person, if possible. This is where you start getting that vibe of the candidate. And, it's just in person is so much better than doing it online. You get a different feeling for that person. Now, if you are going to meet in person, I highly recommend that it's just you. This is not yet the opportunity to meet the rest of the family, but just you to kind of get that feeling, that vibe from the person as they're answering your questions. And I think, that's basically interview number 3. So again, at the end of interview number 3, you would say, please let me know what you think and give me a response back in 12, 24, or 48 hours. It is also interview number 3 after I meet these people in person that I really start to weed out some of the candidates that are not potentially going to be a good fit. And this is really where I narrow it down to 2, 3 at most candidates probably moving forward if you're going to do a maximum of 4 interviews. And again, 4 interviews is my minimum of what I would recommend that you do in order to pick a caregiver. So if you're doing the minimum of 4, it's interview number 3 that you really want to start weeding people out. And so that interview number 4, you're only going to be doing with 1, 2, or 3 people at the most. And interview number 4 is finally where you're going to do a little bit more analyzing, but it's you doing the analyzing. You need to figure out if the questions you've asked in the past, the information that they gave you, is it accurate or not? So this is where you're going to start to check their references, talk to past families, and to see if all their answers from those previous interviews coincide with the people you're talking to now in person. And this is where the real truth, you're trying to dig deep down into the truth of all those answers that you've had in the past. So I personally really like to talk to the parents of the caregivers that I'm trying to hire, as long as they're in their 20s. If they're older than that, obviously no, but even if they're in 20s and they're out of the house and they're independent young adults, I like talking to their parents because parents give me a different perspective on that person than everybody else. I also like to talk, of course, to their references and other bosses they've had in the past, but I do like to talk to parents. Another thing that I do is I really like caregivers that can clean up after my children or clean up after themselves. And this is one of those interviews where I'm trying to get down to whether or not they're being truthful. Like, oh yes, I'm a clean person. I pick up after myself. So especially if it's like a online interview or if it's an in-person interview, I would go to their house. But I would say, take your phone, computer, whatever you're doing this interview on, and flip it around so I can see your room or see your home, and take me around your home, or impromptu ask them to go see their home. And it is impromptu. As you can imagine, what this does for me, who is looking for somebody who can clean up after themselves, is on the fly shows me whether or not they are a clean person. If they flip their computer around and everything is a mess and it's just crazy, that tells me that either one, they weren't being very truthful about being a clean person, or two, this is what they think of as clean, and it may not be my standard of clean. So it gives me an idea of whether or not we're on the same page. If you have a candidate who doesn't want to show you their home or their room in that impromptu setting because they're embarrassed, that also tells you a little bit about that person. So I feel like no matter what, it's a good question to ask, and I think it's a non-typical question that many parents overlook, and I think it's a great question. So I wanted to present it to you today. Along with this interview is that this is the interview when you do want to invite that candidates over to your house and maybe have a short dinner or something, but tell them that they're going to have an hour to an hour and a half with your children where you are in the home, so that you're not leaving them with a stranger yet, but where you're in the home, but you're going to leave them alone. So maybe you're in the basement working or something to that fact. And this is when not only do they get to meet your kids, but it's like a little trial run of interacting with your child. What I love about this particular interview, again, in interview 4, is you're looking at how they interact with your kids. So sometimes you can have somebody say, I'm going to give you an hour and a half. Can you make sure that you're entertaining my kids for an hour and a half? Or sometimes you could just say, hey, this is an hour and a half, and not give them any guidance. But what you're looking for is someone going to just walk into the room and take care of your kids on the fly? And how do they do that? Did they use the resources there, their toys in the bedroom or whatever it is, to entertain your kids? Or are they bringing in activities for your children so that they didn't have to rely on that, and they know activities that are going to be effective to entertain your kids for that hour and a half time period? Whichever way that person went, it tells you a lot about their caregiving and how much they have invested in taking care of entertaining your children. So after this interview, and they've had time to hang out with your kids, again, of course, you give them that opportunity to back out because maybe it wasn't a good mesh, but this is also a time to have your kids get input on their caregiver. How did you like that person? How did you like that person compared to the other candidate? I like to ask my kids and give them input on the person who's going to be taking care of them, because they're going to be spending a lot of time with this person. I feel like school-age children should have a little bit of a say. And I'm not saying that they're going to make the decision, because it's your decision as a parent. But if you don't pick the person that your kids like the most, you may want to explain to your children, why is it that you're picking that person? Maybe it's because the driving record isn't as good, or maybe it's some other quality that you are looking for. And you just have to explain to your child that this quality is really important and I want you to be safe. So I have to go with this other person. And since you still like this other person and don't have any objections to them, then I think I'll go with this other direction instead. But anyway, having your child involved in the process is really important. And this is where they get to do some comparison themselves. I think that's about it. So that you have those 4 interviews, and that's the process that you'll need to go through in order to really authentically find someone. And again, a minimum of 4 interviews on different days. And I hope that was helpful for those of you who are looking for a caregiver. If you want to submit a question for me for next week, I would love that. Direct message me, please, or email me at theimpactfulparent@gmail.com. And I hope you find a caregiver that's going to be the perfect fit for you and your family. Thanks, everybody.